HTML input form attributes. This chapter describes the different form attributes for the HTML input element. The form attribute, the input form attribute, specifies the form the input element belongs to. The value of this attribute must be equal to the ID attribute of the form element it belongs to. So here we have an example. An input field located outside of the HTML form but is still part of the form. So we're gonna open Visual Studio Code, but first we are gonna go and check it out real quick. We have here the form element. So this is the form element. We are starting it, and then we close we end the form tag. And now we're gonna have outside of the form, we're gonna have the label element, and then we're gonna have the input element. And inside of the input element, we're gonna have the form attribute, and this form attribute equal sign double quotes, and inside of the double quotes, the name is gonna be form1. And this one, the form attribute has to match the ID attribute of the form element. As you can see here, the ID attribute of the form element is equal sign double quotes, and it's gonna be form1. So we're gonna go to Visual Studio Code. Okay, so I'm gonna go to help here, and I'm gonna go check for updates to see. Okay, so that's good. I have the latest update now. New file, index.html, so I can create an HTML file. I'm gonna press Shift exclamation mark to have a template. I'm gonna press Ctrl plus so I can have a bigger font. Okay, inside of the body section is where we're gonna type our code. I'm just gonna grab this piece of code here, since we're gonna have a bunch of examples, so it don't take much time. So we're gonna copy it here. Okay, so inside of the body section we have the form element, as you can see, from lines 11 to 15. And let's press Alt plus L plus O to check our code. So this is how it should look like. Okay, but if you cannot open it like this, you just go to your HTML file that you just created and right click and open with live server. So that is that. And from lines 11 to 15 we're gonna have the form element. Inside of the form element we're gonna have the action attribute, equal sign double quote, and it's gonna be /action_page.php. so we are not working with a server, we don't have this file here, so we're just focusing on the HTML part. But this one is important. The ID attribute defines a unique identifier ID, which must be unique in the whole document. Its purpose is to identify the element when linking using a fragment identifier, scripting, or style with CSS. So the ID attribute equal sign double quotes, and it's gonna be form1, and this one is gonna be important, so keep this one in mind. Inside of the form element we're gonna have the label element, the input element, and another input element. So the label element is gonna be here. We're gonna have a for attribute, equal sign double quotes, and the for attribute is gonna be f name. So it has a meaningful name because it's short for first name, colon, and then we're gonna end the label tag. So we're gonna have the input element in line 13. We're gonna have the type attribute, and the type attribute is gonna be text. And again, type equal sign double quotes, and inside of the double quotes is gonna be text. The ID attribute is gonna be f name, that again is short for first name. Then we're gonna have the name attribute, that again is gonna be f name, and then we're gonna have two line breaks. So when we go to our website, it looks like this. So we can have another break line maybe. So this is how it should look like. If we go to our website, it has more space, so we can take that one out. In line 14 we're gonna have the input element. The type is gonna be submit, and the value is gonna be submit. So it's gonna be a button. This is the button that we have here to submit. If we click it, it's sending us to the action_page.php, but we don't have that file since we are not dealing with servers. So we end the form tag in line 15, so pretty much we are done with the form element. But from line 17 to 18, we're gonna have the label element. We're gonna have the for attribute lname, that is gonna be short for last name this time, so you have to give it meaningful name, so lname. And line 18, we're gonna have the input element, and the type attribute is gonna be text. So the ID is gonna be again lname, and the name attribute is gonna be lname. So now it comes the part that we were waiting for, that is gonna be the form attribute. And now the form attribute is gonna be =, double quotes, and inside of the double quotes we have to put the name. It has to match the ID attribute of the form element. So in this case it's form1, so it has to match. The form attribute has to be set to form1 too. If the ID is set to whatever, then the form attribute of the input element, it should be set to whatever too. So we're gonna see how it should look like. So this is the way, and if we click here and try it yourself, let's see how they did it. The input form attribute, the form attribute specifies the form an input element belongs to. We have the first name, we have the submit button. The last name listed below is outside the form element, but is still part of the form. So we're gonna open it again. The last name, as you can see here, is outside of the form element. So this is the form element from lines 11 to 15, and the last name is outside of that, is from 17 to 18. But as you can read here, the last name field below it's outside of the form element, but it's still part of the form. And why is it still part? Because in line 18 we are using the form attribute, and the form attribute =, is matching the ID attribute of the form element. So this form element in line 11, the form element in line 11 has an ID attribute of form1, and here in line 18 we have an input element with a form attribute of form1. So the form attribute is matching the ID attribute. So this is how it's working. So now we're gonna move to the form action attribute. We're gonna close this one. The input form action attribute specifies the URL of the file that will process the input when the form is submitted. Note, the attribute overrides the action attribute of the form element. The form action attribute works with the following input types: submit and image. So here they're giving us this example. We are gonna have here, we have the input element, we have the type attribute, we have the form action. Okay, so the form action =, double quotes. Inside of the double quotes we're gonna have this file, the root action_page2.php, and the value is gonna be submit. So we're not dealing with a server, but still let's check it out. So I click and try yourself, and here it says the input formation attribute, the form action attribute specifies the URL of a file that will process the input when the form is submitted. Okay, so let's grab this piece of code that we have here, and let's go to Visual Studio Code. And first we need to make sure that the body section is empty, so it's empty here. And now we're gonna paste the piece of code that we just grabbed. We're gonna save it, we're gonna open it, and this is how it should look like. Two buttons, submit and then submit as admin. So we're gonna go through the code. So we have from lines 11 to 18 we have the form element. The action attribute is gonna be set to the root action_page.php, and you can create a file and put it in your root, but we're just gonna focus on the HTML part. So inside of the form element we're gonna have the label element with a for attribute of fname, you have it here. We're gonna have an input element with the type attribute of text, an ID of fname, a name of fname. We're gonna have another label element with a for attribute of lname. We're gonna have an input element with a type attribute of text, an ID of lname. The name is gonna be lname, and then we're gonna have an input element, and the type attribute is gonna be submit, and the value is gonna be submit. So this is the button that we have here. And finally, in line 17, this is the important one, we're gonna have the input element with the type attribute as submit, but now we're gonna have the form action attribute, and the form action attribute is gonna be set to the root action underscore page 2, not page 1, but it's gonna be page 2.php. So it's gonna be sent to another file. We don't have that file too, but we're gonna assume that when you click submit this information, when you click submit, the information is gonna go to the action underscore page.php, and when you click the second button, it's gonna go to the second page that is gonna be action underscore page 2.php, and the value is gonna be submit as admin. So the first button is just gonna be submit, and the second button is gonna be submit as admin. So let's see what happens when we click submit. Okay, action underscore page.php, so we cannot find it since we don't have it. Now submit as admin, and it goes here, action underscore page 2.php. So this is how it works, and this is how they're doing it here too. So they just adding an h1, a paragraph, that's that. And now we're gonna move to the form enctype attribute. The input form enctype attribute specifies how the form data should be encoded when submitted, only for forms with method post. And remember this part, only for forms with method post. Note, this attribute overrides the enctype attribute of the form element. The form enctype attribute works with the following input types: submit and image. They given us this example, a form with 2 submit buttons. The first sends the form data with default encoding. The second sends the form data encoded as multiple part /form -data. And here we have this piece of code. So let's just go to our Visual Studio Code, and let's make sure that the body section is empty. And inside of the body section, we're gonna copy and paste this piece of code, and let's see what we have here. Let's open and submit as multiple part /form -data. Okay, so we have the form element, we have the action attribute, is gonna go to the root action underscore page underscore binary that asp. Okay, and the method attribute is gonna be post. So method =, double quotes, and it's gonna be post. And again, you can read this information. The HTTP method that the browser uses to submit the form possible values are post, correspond to the HTTP post method. Form data are included in the body of the form and sent to the server. Okay, now we have the get, corresponds to the HTTP get method. Form data are appended to the action attribute URI with a question mark as separator, and the resulting URI is sent to the server. Use this method when the form has no side effects and contains only ASCII characters. Dialog. Used when the form is inside a dialog element to close the dialog when submitted. This value can be overwritten by the form method attribute on a button or an input element. Yeah, we have here the method attribute. And now inside of the form element, we're gonna have the label element with a for attribute of fname. So you know this part. We have the input element, you have the type text, ID, fname. We have another input element, is gonna be submit, and the value is gonna be submit. So this is our first button. It has the input element, and the type attribute is gonna be submit, and the value attribute is gonna be submit. So this is our first button, that is gonna be this part here, this one. And finally we're gonna have the second input element with the type submit, so this means it's gonna be a button. But now we're gonna have the form enctype or form enctype equal sign double quotes. Inside of the double quotes we're gonna have the multipart slash form hyphen data, and the value attribute is gonna be set to submit as multipart slash form hyphen data, and again it has to be inside of the double quotes. So this is gonna be the second button. It's gonna be this one, and let's check it out. Let's submit it. Okay, what happened? Let me see. I think I didn't refresh it, so let's open it. It's gonna be this one. Click submit. The page isn't working. Okay, my internet. This one is not working either. Okay, so let me see if I click here. Okay, so it's working here. Let me try it again. Okay, so let's go to try yourself, and let's copy this whole code, this whole piece of code, and go to Visual Studio Code, and let's save it, and now open it. Okay, so now I click submit, and it's now working here. The page isn't working. If the problem continues, let me see what happened with my internet. So okay, my internet is working fine. Okay, so if I click submit, okay, let's just go by their example. Binary post input was received. Okay, let's refresh it. Okay, now let's click submit as a multipart form data. Binary post data input was received. Okay, so yeah, this page was returned to you from the server. The server has processed your input and returned the sensor. Oh, okay. Since I'm not working with a server, so that is the problem. But yeah, as you can see here, this is the important part. We have the input element, the type submit. We have the form enctype attribute that is gonna be set to the multipart slash form data, and then it's gonna have this value. So now we're gonna go to the form method attribute. Let's close this one. The form method attribute, the input form method attribute, defines the HTTP method for sending form data to the action URL. Note, this attribute overrides the method attribute of the form element. The form method attribute works with the following input types: submit and image. The form data can be sent as URL variables method get, or as an HTTP post transaction method post. Notes on the get method. This method appends the form data to the URL and name value pairs. This method is useful for form submissions where a user wants to bookmark the result. There is a limit to how much data you can place in a URL, varies between browsers. Therefore, you cannot be sure that all of the form data will be correctly transferred. Never use the get method to pass sensitive information. Password or other sensitive information will be visible in the browser's address bar. And now we're going to have notes on the post method. This method sends the form data as an HTTP post transaction. Form submissions with the post method cannot be bookmarked. The post method is more robust and secure than the get, and post does not have size limitations. So now we have this example, a form with two submit buttons. The first sends the form data with method get, and the second sends the form data with method post. So it's gonna be, let's check it out. Let's see if this time works. I'm gonna delete all the code in my HTML, and I'm gonna press shift exclamation mark so I have a clean template. And first of all, I'm gonna copy this piece of code here. I'm gonna copy it and I'm gonna paste it inside of the body section. So let's see what happens. Save it and then open it. Okay, submit using, now it's working. And if I submit using post, okay, let me see, submit using post. Okay, so since I'm not working with a server, that is the reason I'm having this problem. Okay, so we have the form element. Okay, so we have the form element, and we have the action attribute is going to be action underscore page.php, and the method is going to be get. Now we're going to have the label, the input label, and three more inputs. So line 16 and line 17 are the important ones. Here in line 16 we have the input type, the input element with the type attribute of submit. So this is our first button, and the value is going to be submit using get. So it's going to be this one, submit using get, so I don't have problems here. And the second one is going to be the input element with the type attribute of submit, and now we're going to have the form method attribute set to post, and the value is going to be submit using post. So this is useful when you are not submitting sensitive information. So that is that. I mean, this is useful when you are submitting sensitive information. If you are submitting sensitive information, you don't want to use the get post, you want to use the post method. So that is that. Let's check and try yourself, and let's see how they did it. The input form method attribute. The form method attribute defines the HTTP method for the sending form data to the action URL. So we have the first name, the last name, use submit using get. Okay, it's open in a new tab and submit form data. Your input was received as blah blah blah. And now let's see what happens if I click submit using the post. Okay, so it's working here. Your input was received as, okay, so that is that. Now we're gonna move to the form target attribute. The input form target attribute specifies a name or a keyword that indicates where to display the response that is received after submitting the form. Note, this attribute overrides the target attribute of the form element. The form target attribute works with the following input types: the submit and the image. And here we have the form with two submit buttons with different target windows. So yeah, we're gonna have the form element, we're gonna have the label input, we're gonna have three final input elements. So again, you just focus on the last two input elements. We're gonna have this input element with the type of submit, and the value is gonna be submit. So this is gonna be our first button. Let's just copy this piece of code, and okay, let's paste it here inside of the body section, and let's open it. Okay, so I'm gonna have submit and submit a new window /tab. So let me see if I click submit. I'm gonna get this one, submit. Okay, so it's working this time. Okay, so we have the form element, and again, you in line 16 you are gonna have your input element with the type submit, and the value is gonna be submit. So this is your first button here. Now in line 17 we're gonna have the input element, the type attribute is gonna be submit, and now we're gonna have the form target attribute. And as if you remember from CSS or HTML CSS, when we have the underscore blank, when you click it, it's gonna open in a new tab. So now we're gonna have the value attribute, is we are gonna set it to submit to a new window /tab. So that is that, and we're gonna have this example. So when we submit it, it's gonna send us to the action underscore page.php, and we submit to a new window tab. It's gonna open a new tab. So let's click it, and yeah, it sends us to the same page, but it opened it in a new tab. So that's how it works. Now we're gonna have the form novalidate attribute. The input form novalidate attribute specifies that an input element should not be validated when submitted. Note, this attribute overrides the novalidate attribute of the form element. The form novalidate attribute works with the following input type submit. So we're gonna go to Visual Studio Code, and we're gonna clean the body section so there's nothing here, and we're gonna copy and then paste this piece of code, and let's see how it looks like. So now I'm gonna open it I'm gonna save it first, and then press Alt+L+O, and now I'm gonna have submit and submit without validation. So submit, I'm gonna have this one, submit without validation. Okay, so yeah, it's working. So So we have the form element, we have the action attribute. It's going to be sent to this specific page, action underscore page.php. But again, we're not working with a server, at least not in these HTML videos. But we're gonna have inside of the form element the label element, the form attribute. We're gonna have the input element, the type attribute is gonna be email. The input element, we're gonna have the type is gonna be submit. So this is gonna be our first button, and it's gonna be this one, submit. And the second one, line 15, we're gonna have the input element, the type attribute is gonna be submit, and the form novalidate attribute is gonna be set to form novalidate. So that is that. But we're gonna have the value attribute submit without validation, and this is gonna be the name of the button or the text inside of the button, as you can see here. So when you click submit, it's gonna send us here action underscore page.php, and when you click submit without validation, it's gonna get us here too. So let's click and try ourselves. We have the input form and the input form novalidate attribute. So enter your email, submit. Okay, please fill out this field, submit without validation. If I click it without validation, okay, it works. But if I just try to submit it, it's put please fill out this field. Okay, now the form novalidate attribute of the input tag is not supported in Safari 10 or earlier, so that is that. And let's copy this example. Let's copy the whole text and let's paste it here. Let's open it and let's see. Okay, submit without validation. It lets me submit it without validation. Now submit. Please fill out this. Okay, please fill out this field. So now if I try to submit it, I have to type in some email, and the way pretty much everything is the same. Okay, so yeah, pretty much everything is the same here. So now we're gonna move to the novalidate attribute. The novalidate attribute is a form attribute. When present, novalidate specifies that all of the form data should not be validated when submitted. And here we have this example. Specify the no form data should be validated and submit. So we have the form element, we have the label input, the input element, we have the label element, the input element, and finally another input element. So let's go to Visual Studio Code, press shift exclamation mark to have a template, and inside of the body section we're gonna have this piece of code. Let's copy and paste it. So we have this. So now open it and we're gonna have submit. Okay, so this is how it works. Okay, so it's working, and we have the form element, we have the action attribute, but now outside, okay, inside of the form element, inside of the angle brackets, we're gonna have the novalidate attribute. So inside of the form element, we're gonna have the label element. The form attribute is gonna be email, enter your email. We're gonna have the input element, the type is gonna be email, the ID is gonna be email, the name email, and we're gonna have the input element with the type of submit, and the value is gonna be submit. So we're only gonna have one button. So let's click it here. Let's see. The form novalidate attribute. The novalidate attribute specifies that the form data should not be validated when submitted. So we can just submit it and it's gonna work. And again, we're not dealing with a server, but since it's not giving us any error, it's working. So if I go here and I press all plus L plus O, okay, so it's working here too, action underscore page.php. And yeah, the only thing that you have to do is in the form element, inside of the angle brackets of the form element, you have to type in the no validate attribute in order to not validate it. So Okay, the novalidate attribute specifies that the form data should not be validated when submitted. So that is that. And then finally we're gonna have the HTML form and input element. So the form tag defines an HTML form for the user input, and finally the input tag defines an input control.